Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I have a bunch of stories of now just draft analysis, stadium agreement stuff, and then a new kicker. So that's all up on ESPN.com. I'll have another story out later in the week, probably the weekend. So anyway, go there for all that. In a minute, I'll be joined by former Washington Redskins coach Jay Gruden. I wanted to bring him on because he follows the draft, he studies the draft, and he studies this team and he pays attention to this team, of course, since he coached here. But he also provides a level of expertise that I always enjoy. So while he liked the Commanders draft, there were some picks he wasn't quite sure about. Some things maybe he would have done differently. He talked about the edge rusher. So I think you'll enjoy it. And he also talked about the drafting of a guard by Dallas at number 12. Now, you guys know that I like that guard, Tyler Booker. But at number 12, I think Jay was a little bit confused by that selection. So stay tuned at the end for that one, too. Always entertaining to have Jay, especially when you start talking about guards in the first round, and it brings up memories of when they took Brandon Sheriff. Now, of course, it's he said they took him as a tackle. Anyways, stay tuned for all that. I don't really have a whole lot to add about the stadium topic, and I don't want to get into the little every day having something on that. It's going to be a long process and just trying to gauge where people are at with everything. New information, or I don't know about new information, but just information will come out often about where people stand on the issue, and I'm compiling that myself. But suffice to say, it's going to take some work, and I still think there's optimism that it gets done because if someone else told me, what's the alternative for DC? So anyways, but I'll get into all that as we go on when news warrants. And for now, you can see my little drink there in the background from Huel. And I just want to talk a little bit more about that because anybody who knows me knows I'm very mindful of my protein. I get it in a variety of forms. And when I want a quick, easy to grab meal in the morning, I'm going for the Huel. I've told you about my like for strawberry banana. Got chocolate today. It's the Black Edition shake. And I just poured over a little bit of ice, like the taste. Not hungry again till lunch. And I like that. If you need a quick meal in the morning, give it a shot. 35 grams of protein, folks, 7 grams of fiber, 27 vitamins and minerals. New customers for this get 15% off plus a free gift at huel.com when you use my code KEIM, Keim. Don't miss out. And that's huel.com. Try today. They've sold more than 500 million meals around the world. So that's 15% plus a free gift for new customers using my exclusive code KEIM, Keim, at huel.com. Please see the description for terms and conditions. Skip the stress, not the nutrition. Try Huel today for complete nutrition bottled. So there you go, folks. Now, what you wanted was Jay Gruden. So here we go. Here's my conversation with former Washington Redskins coach Jay Gruden, who also now does work for Underdog Fantasy with Clean Pocket Podcast. Check him out there. Always good stuff. He's on Twitter. You can check him out there. And I always enjoy his analysis. So here we go. All right, Jay. Well, I know you did a breakdown of the Commanders draft picks on it's clean the pocket, clean the pocket.
Clean pocket.
Clean pocket. There you go. Clean pocket on the podcast, clean pocket. So you did the breakdown of there, and I just want to kind of go over some of that and just what you thought of the draft, their offseason in general, and have they closed a gap on the Eagles? But let's start with their draft in general. What did you think?
Well, I was very surprised that they went offensive lineman in the first round. I can't be upset by the fact they're trying to protect Jayden even more and get more big bodies in the building. Can't be upset at that at all. But I just think there's a glaring need on the edge as far as a pass rusher is concerned. And there were some pretty good ones available that they could have taken. Izaraku that went to Dallas, and then Mike Green went a little bit later, and Tuamala, who I like from Ohio State. Those guys were all available. But, I was surprised. And Josh Simmons was there, a tackle from Ohio State, who I think is a better player than Connerly. He had an injury, but I think from a technician and a true tackle position player, I think Simmons was a better player. But Connerly's a good player. He's athletic and provides a lot of depth for that offensive line room.
And then when you have that, because obviously they can move Brandon Coleman to another spot, protecting Jayden. I mean, you're an offensive guy. You have a weapon like Jayden Daniels. How important is it to build that wall in front of him?
Oh, it's critical. I mean, this is your franchise. This is the guy that's going to take you places that you haven't been in a long time. So in order for that to happen, you have to have good protection. And it also helps, obviously, not only pass protection, but the running game, which
Right.
will help protect Jayden as well. So to get Brian Robinson more involved and Austin Eckler and the running backs to help take a little pressure off Jayden also helps. So it's about depth. It's about guys that can play multiple positions, and I think they have that in place. They have a solid left tackle in Tunsil. Obviously, Algretti's a good guard. Obviously, the center's in good position right there. Now, the right side's a little bit up in there. They're going to try Connerly. They're going to try Coleman over there. Obviously, Cosme's coming back, and uh, so they have guys that can rotate and play in there. They just got to find the right combination, and they also have good depth with Trent Scott and the guys they signed in the free agency.
So with again sticking in with Jayden as it because he's a guy who he can run, but he doesn't always look to run. He doesn't look to run first. So you give him a little bit more time in the pocket. How much more dangerous can that make him in this offense?
Well, it's scary how dangerous he already is without those guys last year. I thought the offensive line played pretty decent last year, and I think they're even going to be even better this year. Jayden's ability to go through progressions and also hurt you with his legs at what makes him top 4 or 5 quarterback in the National Football League. So giving him more time is dangerous. Giving him more running lanes is dangerous. Helping him with the running game, which will help the play actions and the bootlegs, is dangerous. So I don't think there's anybody that can argue the fact that getting an offensive lineman in the first round is going to make Washington better. But it doesn't help their defense. You know, they gave up 55 points to Philadelphia, over 250 yards rushing, 250 yards passing in the last game. And I don't know if they did enough defensively to right the ship, but offensively, they're going to be a good place.
And I was going to ask you too, because like obviously they got some guys in free agency, right? And they built some depth along that front, but you don't have that edge guy. When you don't have that one guy who can really kind of elevate the pass rush, how much harder is it to manufacture that rush?
Yeah, it'll be difficult. You know, you like to have a closer, you know, especially since Washington can score points and they're going to be ahead in some games. You got to have that closer mentality type player. However, they're going to have to do it by committee. They're going to have to do it with Frankie Luvu off the edge. They're going to have to do it with Bobby Wagner in the A gap. They're going to have to do it with stunts and twists, which I know Dan Quinn loves to do anyway. Put Armstrong on a guard like they did sometimes throughout the season last year, create matchup issues because they don't have true one-on-one winners anywhere across the board. So they're going to have to do it in unique ways and blitzes and fronts. And I know Dan Quinn has that ability, and the defense is smart enough to do that.
Trey Amos, the second round corner, you had called him, I think, on the podcast, the best pick in their draft.
Yeah, he's
Why do you
he's
think?
well, he's a great corner. You know, he's a lockdown corner. He can play man. He can play zone. He's tough. He's long. He can run. He ran sub 4.4, I believe, high 4.3s at the combine. So he's got all the traits to be great, and he's got ball skills and he's tough. So I mean, what else do you want? I mean, 6'1", tough, smart, and can play the ball. So that's very very important. Now they have a decision to make. They put Sinistro back at nickel, which is a true spot. Now you have Amos and Lattimore at corner, but the fact that you have some depth there is very important as well because Lattimore's had some injury history. Sinistro's not the biggest guy in the world. Now you have pieces in there. So if you have 17-game season, you miss some games, these guys can fill in and rotate and still be a solid, very solid secondary.
So with Amos too, and one of the things in his talking to people over here and just watching him, obviously, the better corner play, you can help your rush a little bit, but also creating turnovers, the ability to disguise. And if you have a corner who can do what he does that make it harder or easier to disguise things and make it a little bit harder for the offense?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think that's Dan Quinn's specialty. He plays a lot of different coverages, and disguise is a very big part of it. If you can make the quarterback pull the ball down with some indecision, it helps out your pass rush tremendously because we all know that they're going to have a lot of help with the pass rush. So, different type of fire zones, different type of zones is good, but also the ability to play tight man to man is very, very important. And I think with the ability to play man to man and disguise some coverage intent is going to be critical for the Washington defense moving forward. But they're going to have to play some loaded boxes to stop the run. So that's going to put the corners in jeopardy, which now they have good corners that can handle it. That's the biggest thing that I see. Now you put a safety down on a box and you feel good about your corners holding up against the best receivers in pro football.
Going back to Connolly for 1 minute, because one of the things that just jumped out to me too, and I was thinking about the corners because you got to play the Eagles, you got Devontae Smith, you got AJ Brown, you want a mix of kind of corners. Same thing for the offensive front, right? When you're making a decision as a team, how much do you look at like, well, listen, man, the Giants are getting Abdul Carter. They already got these passers. You got Micah Parsons, you got Jalen Carter. How much would that factor into a decision to maybe beef up that line?
Oh, 100%. You have to continue to beef up your offense and defensive lines. Um, that's probably right now the most glaring issue is why the Eagles won the Super Bowl. Their offense and defensive line play was dominant
Right.
across the board. They stayed healthy, and obviously Saquon was a big part of it. Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown, you mentioned, and the defense, but offense and defensive line dominated the line of scrimmage throughout the season, and that's what I think Washington's trying to get to by drafting Connor Lee in the first round and adding Tunsil. They're trying to get to that point where they can establish the line of scrimmage dominance on offense and compete with Philadelphia's defensive line and the Giants now that they add Abdul Carter, like you mentioned. So, yeah, I think it's critical to make sure that you continue to protect your quarterback and be able to run the ball with your offensive line.
And then obviously, and I'm going to get to Lane in a minute, but everybody talks about getting the best available player. That's what always the goal is, right? How many times do you think when you're here with that you guys would really do that? It's one thing to say it, another to do it.
Yeah,
Is that always a hard thing, or do you kind of like look at his best player at position of need?
I think there's a fine line there. I think typically if you have a position of need, you can convince yourself that that position of need, that player is as good as the best player on the board. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. Yes.
You can convince yourself of that. Not very often do you have a true top five pick available and you're picking 20. Usually that doesn't happen. Usually they're already gone. Sometimes it happens in the third and fourth and fifth rounds. You'll see a guy with a better grade, but you take a position of need. Um, I think that's necessary. You can see a lot of teams did that this year. Buffalo took all defense. San Francisco took all defense. There's a lot of teams that really attacked their needs as opposed to taking the best position of player available. So yeah, there's a fine line, but you have to continue to upgrade your team.
Jalen Lane, speed guy. What do you like, or what do you think?
You know what? He's a slot player. He can really run, and that's important to have a trait that you really like. And I think he's a punt returner. He's going to compete with McCaffrey as far as a key punt returner. I think he had 67 punt returns, a couple touchdowns. So to add that threat as well will help his stock a lot come time to make the cuts. I don't know if he's going to take any. I think it's going to be between him and McCaffrey really for that extra receiver
Right.
spot. So it's going to be interesting to see. But he can really run. He's explosive with the ball in his hands. He can do the jet sweeps, the reverses, all the fun stuff with the bells and whistles. But at the end of the day, how is he going to break into the lineup? Because Debo's a good slot player. Obviously, Terry McLaurin's out there. They got Noah Brown, who's a physical player who really is an important player in the running game to block safeties and block linebackers. But it'll be interesting to see. Anytime you can add a guy that's 5'10" and runs a 4.3 40, I think it's a good ad for your football team.
And that's what I'm going to say too. When you have that speed as an offensive guy, how much say that you got to find some packages to get him on the field?
Yeah, you got to try. The issue is Terry's so good and Debo's so good with the ball in his hands. I mean, how many different you only have one ball,
Right.
and you're going to put him out there and give him the ball, and Debo's going to be like, hey, why are you giving him the ball, not me? I mean, I'm Debo Samuel, for God's sakes. Give me the ball. I'll run people over. I don't have to use my speed. So it'll be interesting to see how Cliff uses all these guys. But like I said before, you can never have too many guys that can really, really run. And I'm sure they'll find unique ways to get him down the field because he really can take the top off, in the slot or even outside. I mean, he can fly. So it's always good to have a guy out there, play action passes, sending him on the deep post and letting Jayden let it rip. And if the safeties take it, then you take the Debo on the high cross or Terry on the high cross or whatever it is. And three-level throws will be very, very good with this guy taking the top off.
How much too can you help just maybe open it up using him horizontally, using that speed, and maybe either they're following him, you're creating something inside. Like how much can that be a factor too?
Oh yeah, for sure. Anytime you have a guy that scares the hell out of defenses where you have to put a safety over the top, just opens up everything underneath. It'll open up things for Debo. It'll open up things for Austin Eckler and out of the backfield for Zach Ertz at the tight end position. So yeah, I think, but Terry already has that. Terry already strikes fear in people's
Sure.
hearts when he goes out there and he takes the top off. So they already have a guy that can take the top off. So have another one, have two of them is good. But like I said before, it's going to be hard for Cliff to find ways to get everybody the ball that he has on this offense.
Right. I think it sounds like his biggest mark early on would be made as a punt returner, where you can use the speed and you can get him in some space situations, and then hopefully for them that it works out. Keim, the linebacker from UCLA.
Yeah, I watched him on tape, but I'm not the biggest fan of this cat. He's taller, he's skinny, he plays little, not a very physical guy, but he's a guy that can run. I'm sure if he makes the team, it'll be because he's a special team uh, uh, killer. That's what he's going to have to be because the new kickoff rule, I think you're going to have some speed at linebacker that can run down on kicks and obviously block on the kickoff return because that's going to be a big weapon for teams this year, the kickoff and kickoff return. So he can run, he's long. I think that'll be his biggest benefit. He's good in coverage. He's got good feet. He can cover sideline to sideline, but as far as trying to stop the run or if Saquon Barkley's in the game, you got to get this guy out, because, he's not the greatest tackler in the hole. He's just a tall, skinny kid. He looks more like a safety to me, but he can run. And I think that's good to have a guy in your team that can run to help on special teams and
It's
play in dime situations. Kind of like, when we drafted, which I'd never understood it. We drafted Sua Cravens in the second round. He was not a safety, he was not a linebacker, but he could run a little bit, and he's kind of a hybrid position guy. Where do you put him? A nickel? He's not really a nickel, he's not really a linebacker. The object is probably get him on dime situations where he can cover tight ends and cover backs. That's what he can do, and known passing situations.
And that's what I say. I think that's the plan for him. And also, could he be like that? Everybody talks about the big nickel, that kind of role. Is that what you're
Yeah,
kind of
yeah, but
looking
he's
at?
not big.
Right. I think he's like
He's
six.
tall.
He
He's
looks like, he runs like he played receiver before he got to
Yeah. Oh,
college.
you can tell. You can tell he's
Yeah.
he's not a thumper by any stretch of the imagination. He's a drag down, go to your, ankle tackler, but he can run. He can cover some space, so you're asking a guy to cover flats, cover deep hooks, cover high crossing routes, cover backs out of the backfield, tight ends. That's his strength. And he can get receivers and tight ends on the ground. That's no problem. But I'm just worried he can't hold up against the run on first, second down. This is a nickel dime type player and a special team player.
Yeah, and I think that's how they view him as well, a cover guy using that speed in that role because like with he's not Bobby, he's not Frankie, and they have Jordan
Yeah.
McGee behind him too, and like he's more of a
If you're
big
excited that this guy is the heir apparent of Bobby Wagner,
no,
don't do that.
no. Jordan McGee, I think, is that guy right now. Ja'Cory Krosky at the running back.
Yeah, he only played one game at Arizona this year because it
Right,
was I don't know what it was. It was
right.
whatever. But yeah, he looked pretty good in that game, and I guess he had a really good East West Shrine game, and he's an interesting guy. I think he's going to have to beat out Jeremy McNichols. That'll be a tough competition, but he's not ready to take Austin Eckler or B Rob's job. That's for sure. He's going to have to really do some dynamic stuff to get on the field. He's going to make his hay on special teams. And as he gets the ball in preseason and training camp, if he can really show the coaches and show Cliff and that he is an explosive player, maybe he will take some carries off B Rob. But I don't see him making a huge mark this year. Maybe practice squad this year. Maybe, takes McNichols' spot as a third running back on the roster so he could play a little bit.
When you have a guy who hasn't played like that in his best games, I mean, he had the one game at Arizona, he did a nice job. It's against New Mexico. You're not seeing him against, the Power Four conferences or whatever. How hard is it to get that full evaluation? Because his stuff was New Mexico, primarily. He had the 1 year at New Mexico, he had a great year. How hard is it to get a really good evaluation of what he can do?
Yeah, I'm sure they did some research on him at New Mexico and then the East West Shrine game where he's pit up against some guys similar skill sets and athletic ability, some good players in the East West Shrine game. I think that's probably where they got the best look at him. You can watch him in practice and pass protection drills, watch him in 9-on-7, watch him in 7-on-7. I'm sure he showed enough skill, enough speed, enough vision where it's, hey, you know what? Late in the draft, let's take a flyer on this guy and see what he can do. Let's see if he can compete with Jeremy McNichols and give us another back in the room. And obviously Rodriguez is still here too, so that's another good back. So they have 5 pretty good backs that are in good competition.
What do you think of B Rob?
I like B Rob. B Rob's a tough runner. I think he's a good first, second down guy, and he's got good vision. He's I could you get better? Yeah, I think there's a lot better backs out there, but I think he's a solid running back in the National Football League on first, second down. And I think Austin, I think the role that he played last year was perfect. We don't want to give him too many carries. I think 6, 7 touches a game, whether it's out of the backfield or catching the ball or handing the ball off, is perfect for him. He's still got a great knack for the game as far as in the routes. He's got good hands. He's got a good feel for it. Just don't want to overuse him. He's getting older, but he still is a dynamic player and can be used in critical situations.
What have you thought about their offseason in general, adding Laramie Tunsil, Debo, and then obviously getting a few guys on that defensive line, Kinlaw, Goldman, Dietrich Wise, Jacob Martin?
Yeah, Jacob Martin's more of a pass rusher, but the other guys are more run players. I think Kinlaw is more of a run player. Dietrich Wise a more run stopping defensive end. Those guys are good guys to have against the run because they can hold up against tight ends and tackles on the outside zones and the power plays. Now these guys aren't going to get much pressure on the quarterback. They never have. Kinlaw has always been an underachiever in that regard for some reason. He's big, he's strong, he's got good hands. We always wonder why he doesn't have 10 sacks and 40 pressures from when you see him walk in the room, you're like, holy, it, you know. But you know, you look at his production, you're like, come on, man. But he can hold up against the run. Sheldon Day is a good player, so they have good depth on the defensive line, a good rotation. So it'll be exciting to see how they do. The guy that you got to, I think has to step up is Duran's got to step up and play better. He's got to get better pass rush going. He'll do that. So Farrell's a good run player as well. They just don't have any juice off the edge is my biggest concern.
Yeah, and would Zadarius Smith, if he's a free agent right now, if they go out and get him with that, how much could a guy like that help?
He's not much of a pass rusher anymore either, in my opinion. He's okay. He plays hard. He's a tough guy. I think he fits into the culture. I know he's a great guy. He works hard, but he's not a true pass rusher that you're worried about. Like if I'm an offensive coordinator and I see Zadarius out there on the edge, I'm not putting extra people out there to slow him down. I'm not chipping him. I'll let my left tackle have him. I think but he'd be a good add to the room.
With Kinlaw, and you brought that up because I think that's one question people have is what can he add? The thing I fall back on, I'm curious from your perspective. Adam Peters knew him from San Francisco. Daryl Tapp coached him there, and Dan Quinn is a D-line guy. So there's something they must feel like they can unlock. He's played several years in this league. So at what point does a guy get to like you can unlock this potential versus this is just who he is?
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of room for him to get better. I mean, with the talent that he has, the skill set that he has, he should be a dominant Pro Bowl type player on the defensive line. And I think, know it, Adam knows him. I think they might have enough there that they like from a person standpoint. If he's a big lazy bum, they wouldn't have gone out and got him. So obviously he's going to work hard at it. And I know Dan Quinn and the coaches will do a great job working with him. And Deron Payne's a good guy to have next to him. So that's a good 1-2 punch. And then you able to keep them fresh because you got Goldman and you got Sheldon Day and you got the other kid they drafted last year, Newton. So yeah, so they have a good rotation. I think that's the biggest thing for a guy like Kinlaw, as big as he is. If he can stay fresh throughout the course of the game, he can be attacking and play low or get his pads down. He can be a force for sure.
Yeah, because when I'd watch him, like he definitely gets his pads up at times. When he keeps it low, he's really good. When he gets it
Yeah,
up,
yeah,
he gets
yeah.
moved.
That's being tired. You got to
Yeah,
keep him
big,
fresh. And
yeah.
if he has a good offseason program, maybe he gets in better shape this year and gets his pads down, plays about 35, 40 snaps a game. If he can, play 40 snaps a game and be a violent player, they got something there in Kinlaw. He's definitely a good player.
How much have they closed the gap on the Eagles, or have they?
Defensively, maybe a little bit. I think Jeremy Chin was a big loss, really. I think he was a pretty good player. I don't think they really replaced him. I don't think, Will Harris is really Jeremy Chin, and I don't really think they have a really good run stopping safety now. That's the biggest issue. The safety position is a big issue for me now, and obviously edge rusher. They've closed it a little bit, being able to stop the run with the big ads with Goldman and obviously who we just talked about, Kinlaw. So um, I just worry about the defense. We worried about them last year, and they actually overachieved, I think, last year. I don't know if they're going to overachieve again this year, but we'll have to wait and see. I just think they need a couple more pieces, a better pass rusher, maybe another safety. Yeah.
Because you look at this, like obviously it takes time to build the kind of roster you say, okay, now you're really where you want to be, right? But when you get a guy like Amos, and I know he had like 3 picks last year. How much can just one corner maybe help create more turnover opportunities for this? That's one thing. And then two, best offense is a good defense. Is that how much do
Yeah,
you
no,
find?
both of them are true. They're both very true. When you have two good corners, three good corners now, it allows you to play more single high safety and be more attacking on defense with your fronts and with your safeties being involved in the defense and the run schemes and all that stuff, and then forcing teams to throw the ball. And you have your corners that have good ball skills and can turn the ball over. And you can add rushers as well. I mean, you can play 5-man rushes and be more 6-man pressures. You can do some cover zeros and be ultra aggressive if you want to, but if your corners can hold up. And now I think they can. So I think Dan Quinn has a good enough blitz package where he can be very creative with the corners they have, and that helps out a lot. And turnovers are going to be key. They don't want to be conservative and just play 4-man rushes and mix in their covers. They want to be aggressive and try to get the ball back for Jayden in that offense. And then Jayden and the offense, they'll do a good job of being balanced and keeping the defense fresh. I think they can work out hand in hand.
I may have asked you this in an earlier podcast, but with Jayden, you're going into year two. What would you do as an offensive coach I don't have any doubts that the guy is going to keep improving because of how he works at it. I think, you know how important that is, but what would you kind of stress to help him keep growing and developing while defenses are trying to obviously study him and take things
Yeah,
away?
you just continue to feed him information and concepts that he's comfortable with. Make sure you really have a good sit down with him, and make sure every game plan you have plays that he's very comfortable with and what he's good at, and which is everything. That's the biggest issue I have is we can call bootlegs, we can call quarterback zone reads, we can call RPOs, and then your playlist is 300 plays long. Holy cow, we got too many plays.
Right.
He can do all of them. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is for Cliff and them to really hone in on what he's comfortable with and what he's good at, and then every week have some different nuances off of those things and continue to attack. I mean, there's really nothing that he can't do. Right? I mean, I don't really see anything. I wouldn't be afraid if I was calling plays for Jayden. Uh, there's really not any type of play, formation, drop back, bootleg that I'd say this is not for Jayden. I'd never call this for Jayden. He's not good at this. He's good at everything. So that's going to be the biggest problem for Cliff is trying to limit the playbook and make sure he stays comfortable.
What's just a couple more things? What's the one thing that for a young quarterback that stunts their development? Like, what is something like if quarterback doesn't do this, team doesn't do this, what stunts it?
I think a lot of times quarterbacks, in year two, they might start to look at their stats a little bit, be afraid to let the ball go, maybe be a little bit more conservative in their ability to attack defenses, throwing the ball in tight windows and things of that nature. I don't think that'll happen to Jayden. They might start thinking about their stats a little bit more. I want to get my percentage up and I don't want to get hurt. I think Jayden's going to continue to attack. I really don't think he's going to have a second, a year two meltdown or anything. I think the confidence level has got to stay high, continue to protect them, stay out of long yardage, and obviously try to keep the team into multi-dimensional areas, attacking defenses. You don't want to be in down 2 touchdowns every time you have the ball. That'll stunt his growth, obviously, but I don't think that any of that'll happen. I think he's going to be just fine.
And the last thing, anything surprise you with the draft? All the quarterback talk and all that. What surprised you with it?
Well, the whole talk was on Shador. Didn't really surprise me. It surprised me he went in the fifth or whatever. Well, that was a little too late. I think he probably was a third or fourth round type guy. I had him actually in one of my mocks that I kind of playing around with. I had to go with the Giant. I just thought all the hype was there for somebody who would take him early in the first round. But when you watch him on tape, it's not a total surprise that he went that late. I thought it was a surprise Will Howard went after him. I think Will Howard had a better year. He's a more physical guy, 6'5", 240 pounds. Quinn Ewers went to back-to-back playoffs. He went after him. I was surprised at that. But the draft is a draft. You just never know what teams think. Everybody has their scouts, their GMs, their coaches, their evaluations. It takes a long time. There's a lot of work put into these things, and sometimes we don't understand it. I don't understand. When I was coaching, I don't understand why the Steelers took the guy that they took. I'm like, how the hell did they take this guy? I didn't even grade this guy. Who is this guy? But
Really?
there's a method to the madness. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, and there's no exact science. We'll figure it all out in about 4 or 5 years how bad this draft was or how good it was.
And that's what I asked you too. Like, how much, do you ever know what, like, okay, we know Team X is going to take this guy because of our intel. Do you really, like, what kind of intel would you get that might help you with that? Do you get a lot of that?
Yeah,
Or do you just
you
kind of
try to
just try
figure
to
out by
guess?
their position needs and who's available, then you can kind of tell. Like the Cowboys, I was shocked they took a guard at 12. All the defensive help that they needed. I just can't believe they took a guard. I can't believe it. DeAndre Campbell's sitting there, and what happens? The Eagles get him. I'm like, how does the Eagles get DeAndre Campbell? He's the best linebacker in the draft, and now they just got a day one starter, and then they get a day one starter at safety from Texas. I'm like, how the hell do these guys fall to the Eagles? But you just never know how it falls out, and teams draft guys because I think what people really don't understand too is these one-on-one draft meetings when you get to meet the kid, you fall in love with these kids. Sometimes these are like the guard from Alabama, Booker. He might be the greatest kid, good leader, captain, which I don't know just by evaluating them
Right,
on
right.
tape. I think that has a lot to do with it as well, how they can help not only on the field but off the field and the culture they're building.
He's a guy that I really liked because I thought he was a road grader, not the greatest mover, but he's a mover. But yes,
He's a
it just
guard.
yeah. What's that?
He's a guard.
Yeah, he's a
You can
well.
guard a second or third, fourth round. You can find a
So
guard.
that reminds me of the quote you had about we
Sheriff.
picked a guard at fifth.
Well, we took him to be a tackle, but we knew he
Well,
wasn't a tackle. Yeah.
but you guys knew he wasn't a tackle like 2 weeks into camp or a
I
week
mean,
into.
who are the starting guards for the Commanders right now or last year? When did they get drafted? Algretti?
Allegretti was a free agent signing. I don't even remember when he was drafted. Cosme was a second round pick.
Okay, second, third round. Yeah. I mean, you don't need to take him at 12. You got to take a guy that makes the stat line. You know, a guy like a linebacker who has 12 tackles a game, or a receiver who has 1,500 yards receiving. You know what I mean? They could have had Holden. They could have had Golden from Texas. They could have had any pass rusher they wanted. They could have had Campbell, not a guard.
There you go. This is why I love talking to you. Anything you got to plug right now? What else you got going on?
Just Clean Pocket on YouTube. Check us out. We work for Underdog Fantasy. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. These guys are good guys. We're just trying to get our brand recognized a little bit. So if you want to tune in, great. You know, we're just trying to make some hay. It's fun.
It's good stuff. And I always love your analysis, and I'm glad you guys put clips up there too that I can tweet and retweet or whatever. So
yeah,
thanks a lot, Jay.
Yeah, no problem, John. Thanks for having me.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Jay for joining me, and thank you, as always, for tuning in. I'll be back on Monday with another episode. So I'll talk to you next time.